Basically, the project we have is we have 4 universities, and what we're trying to do is investigate a writing about writing and highly reflective approach to writing at these universities by using a set of shared reflective prompts, a set of shared data analysis, sort of a set of shared research questions and theories. And so each university is taking a slightly different approach to that. But in the end, we have this massive data set that we've built up that we can then talk about what are the connections and what things are we seeing that are across discipline, like across institutions, which means that we can assume some generalizability, and which things are we seeing that are just specific to particular courses. And it's not that we're just studying first-year composition either. We're actually studying, we've got 3 different kinds of first-year composition courses, one at my university at Oakland, one at Seton Hall, one at George Washington University, and then we have an intermediate level writing course at Wayne State, and then we have my upper division peer tutoring course at Oakland. So we've got these great different courses that we're looking at how students are learning to write and transfer, and the role of reflection and metacognition and all of that.
I'm particularly interested inside of our larger research project in identity, and what's particularly exciting right now is that the preliminary analysis I've done suggests that identity is a really good predictor of some other things that happen for the students, and it's there's sort of a whole theoretical thing that I like about it that's moving away from, as we have been all moving away from just a sort of a cognitive approach to transfer, to thinking about that the whole human being inside of a larger social, cultural space is doing the learning, and the learning that's happening is something that's in some ways already implicated in that student's surroundings. And so even some of the talks I was hearing today, like people say, well, motivation is such an important thing. But why? It's because motivation is attached to identity. So they were talking about how, students with certain majors weren't as interested in doing whatever this particular thing was. And, well, yeah, of course, because they can't see their future in that way, and that's an identity issue. This Raza Vanish has made these really interesting connections to how in really all of our written acts and speech acts, our identities are implicated. And so if that's true, then we should be able to look at students' texts and work backwards and see where are the places where we see a student buying into the whole academic project. So I think that's been exciting for me to do just from a methodological point of view. But the possibility that, let's say, students' identity that is being negotiated in the fall could have implications for what happens in the spring. If I just think about the number of codes we have, it indicates how incredibly complex it is and how many different angles you can get at transfer. I mean, we have metacognition, we have identity, we have sort of seeing those knowledge connections, past to present, present to future. We've got students' use of sources, their declarative and procedural knowledge. I mean, there's just so many different ways of measuring and ways of thinking about it. Students might be saying things in their reflections, and it's not at all clear what those have to do with what it means they'll be able to do in the future. I think the jury's really out on that. And so this is just sort of, I've been thinking about Donald Schoen's book, Reflective Practitioner. I think most of the reflection that we've been capturing is reflection on action. And his book is mostly interested in reflection in action. I think we do start seeing that in some of our data. But my interest in doing compose aloud stuff, which is, I embedded that in some of my research, my part of it, is that you get to see reflection in action.
We used a common set of assignment prompts and research design to collect data across 4 institutions. But I'm going to talk about that from the perspective of my institution, because the Elon project developed in tandem with our development of an in-house assessment project for our composition program. And so part of what's really compelling for me is the way the two data sets speak to each other. So we are contextualizing our in-house results in really important ways through the cross-institutional data set. So for example, we got some troubling results in our portfolio evaluation in which students who had reflective assignments actually scored worse on a portfolio evaluation than students who did not on the rubric criterion dealing with reflection. So as you might imagine, this was deeply depressing to us. And we've thought a lot about why that might have happened. We have some tentative explanations having to do with the need for scaffolding between informal reflection assignments and the more formal reflective argument that we were using for the portfolio evaluation. However, as I said, the ELON data is really helping us to contextualize this issue as well. In addition to the scores, the quantitative data, we did debriefings with portfolio evaluators who included all of our instructors for our pilot and control sections for the curriculum we were testing. And across the board, no matter what section, what type of section students took, portfolio readers felt that the quality of reflection in general was not strong. We had some examples of stronger reflection, but across the board, portfolio readers felt like the reflection was not strong and that we needed, as I said, more scaffolding of assignments and that we needed a more robust assignment sequence that helped students link their reflections on their process generally with what they were doing in specific assignments and with the course learning outcomes that they needed to address in their reflective arguments introducing their portfolios. We were looking in particular at our intermediate writing course where we are using in many sections a writing about writing curriculum that's asking students to focus on writing in their discipline or profession. We have a very pragmatic instrumentalist student body, and so we were responding in part to the interests of this student body, which our students are really looking for that pragmatic connection, and WOW gave us a way to do that. We focused in particular on two codes that were very relevant for the Wayne curriculum, anticipating transfer-focused thinking, anticipating connections to future professional life, and transfer-focused thinking, anticipating connections to future coursework. We found two important outcomes from that cross-institutional coding that helped us contextualize our portfolio scores. One, Wayne students' number of codes in both those two areas increased across the semester. Two, while Wayne students' number and percentage of codes were lower than some other institutions in the cross-institutional study at the beginning of the semester, by the end of the semester they were higher than the number of code applications for students at any other university. So part of what that tells us is our curriculum is moving in the right direction. Students are getting part of what we're asking them to get, but they're not all the way there. The other thing the cross-institutional data gave us that was really useful was a look at specific code excerpts that help us pinpoint the difference between what readers saw as really strong reflection, which was very explicit and elaborated development of concrete examples, versus the kind of vague generalized reflection where students say, I know this will help me in the future. So the data set also helped us to kind of really fine-tune that distinction, and we plan to use some of the material from the data set in our professional development.